And this goes along with the rest of the aggressive defensive domain. You
Mm-hmm.
see people wielding their power like it's a bludgeon. Well, I'm in charge of, or I was this, or I am that. And it's like, oh, who cares? Today, we want to pick up on something we touched on earlier when we talked about business performance and a model that explains three major parts of it, each of which you can get data from to help you know what to fix.
Yeah, and I think what's super exciting about this is, Kirby, and I'm sure you'll agree because we keep hearing it from clients, is that there's actually a way to measure what it is you want to measure, which means you're able to do what you need to do to improve the places that you need to improve. Is that nice and big?
That's kind of big. So we were at an international conference of fire equipment manufacturers where I was a keynote presenter a couple of weeks ago. We had what, 2, 3, I don't know how many hundred people in the room.
I think so, yeah.
And when I got to talking about this, and that not only is there a model for culture, but that you can measure culture, head snapped up off the table.
Yeah.
It's actually what got us in the door in the first place, is the idea that you not only can measure culture, and we're going to explain how much, but having measured culture, you can help make your place of business the kind of place that people love, one that you and I have both experienced.
Yeah, and we touched on this in the previous episode. When you're a part of a culture that is thriving and resilient and people are dedicated, they know where they're going, they know why they're going there, it just feels different. And it feels different everywhere you go in that organization.
And there's, you mentioned in that last episode about going around the world, and I know as I did too, when you got to a place that had really become part of the culture, you'd walked in the door and you felt like you were home.
Yeah.
Even though you're on the other side of the planet, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, like these are my people.
Yes.
And then you'd walk into another place that hadn't quite bought into the culture, and you could feel it too. And there was something, it's like, oh, this isn't the way I hoped.
Yeah, so I think it's important that we actually give some examples of why this tool is so effective and why we love it so much, so that people understand just how great it is to leverage.
It's not our tool. I came across it some years ago and working with another client. The parent company that invented it out of the United States is called Human Synergistics. They have branches all over the world, and it's been around for more than 3 decades, and they have put tens of thousands of businesses through this measurement system. And they have so much data, they even can predict what kind of a culture is associated with business success. You and I just met with Human Synergistics Canada, and we had this deep dive into just how much benefit can come out of this tool. And so what I'm hoping you and I can do is we can talk through the tool and actually show, like, really, why does it really matter? But more than that, to show people that, in fact, there's something they can do with it.
Yeah, so I'll make sure that I have the example graphic up on the screen as we're chatting. But if you are a leader, CEO, senior leader, etc., just part of an organization, and you start to see your organization in the examples that we're giving, please understand that there is something you can do about it. And you can target areas that you need to improve, which the tool will show you, without having to compromise what's already working, which is fantastic.
And this is, I think, the thing that excites the hundreds of CEOs I've talked to this year, is when they get they go from being somewhat skeptical to curious, from curious to interested, from interested to excited, and from excited to, like, oh my gosh, like, urgent. Where the heck has this been, and when can it get me some?
Yeah.
It's the notion that culture improvement, let's not just call it culture change, because that's actually not what we're promoting. It's not what Human Synergistics promotes. We're promoting culture improvement.
Yeah.
You could do so very, very specifically, selectively, and with a lot of insight. I'm not saying it's easy.
Of course.
I am saying that you can understand exactly what you're going at. So let's start.
Yep.
One of the three domains, and there's three domains that they talk about in this tool. There's the green, which is passive defensive.
Mm-hmm.
There's the red, which is aggressive defensive. And then there's the blue, which is constructive.
Yep.
Each of these, there's subparts, and even within those, there's lots of little subparts. But what happens is their survey tool, and it is a survey tool, but it's highly, highly accurate, will give you specific readings on exactly what's going on. So let's talk first about passive defensive.
Yep.
One of the most common ways to describe a passive defensive business is bureaucratic. That everything's decided by committee.
Mm-hmm.
That pretend nice and harmony, or pretend harmony, is what really matters.
Yep.
It's confrontation is frowned upon. Speaking up is almost even frowned upon. Yep. This is a place where you put up, you shut up, you just fall into the processes that dominate the world, and it's not my job.
Yeah, and what's super ironic is it's oftentimes these organizations that like to say that they strive to be innovative and inclusive and forward thinking. Yeah, you're only forward thinking as long as you're thinking the same thing that the leader is thinking.
And that's a great way to describe it. If you're working at a place where you get a little too much groupthink, same think, and you're sitting there looking around wondering, does anybody see what a mess this place is? And you look around the table and everybody's doing the same thing that you are, you might be at a passive defensive workplace.
Absolutely. One
of the beautiful things that comes with the Human Synergistics tool that's called the Organization Culture Inventory is they have so much depth and so much breadth of experience. They literally have laundry lists of possible actions you can use to counter what you're seeing.
Without damaging the parts that are working.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Right? Is you don't have to burn the house down to get good results.
Absolutely.
The second domain is the aggressive defensive. And this is like the red is the right color. The red is really, really, really the right color. And because the aggressive defensive is just that. It's oppositional, which is argumentative just because. I've seen this firsthand working with another client. And like literally the senior executive for a country in a pharmaceutical business was just being oppositional because she thought somehow it was going to stimulate thinking. And no matter how good an idea was, she would just say, white when somebody said black.
I'm just plain devil's advocate. I'm just trying to give another perspective. No, you're being a roadblock.
Well, I'll take it a step further. And, there's one of my favorite TV shows, The Big Bang Theory, actually featured this in one episode. A great sign of aggressive defensive is language. And for me, oppositional people like when it's a really aggressively oppositional culture, you're going to hear two words often used together, but and just. But I was just, and so much so that I've taught my son not to, just but me. Because what it is it's just sheer argumentation.
Totally.
It's not constructive dialogue. It's just oppositional. You say this, I say that. You say 0, I say 1. It's like, there's just no quality to this.
Yeah, and I think those individuals were perhaps given the impression somewhere along the way that disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing is somehow constructive, where it's not. Yes, precisely. It's deconstructive.
Or it's
and they simply, they haven't learned or been shown how to have a constructive type of ideation session.
And this goes along with the rest of the aggressive defensive domain. You
Mm-hmm.
see people wielding their power like it's a bludgeon.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in charge of, or I was this, or I am
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's like, oh, who cares? And they wield it around as if it gives their ideas more authority. And
Yeah.
then from there, we'll see people that start to become immensely competitive, like in an unhealthy way. A little bit of competition is great. I'm a huge fan of
Yes.
it. You and I both are. But excessive competition will rip your place apart.
It's true. And I think one gentle reminder to individuals that are setting KPIs and benchmarks, you need to be very careful not to be pitting your teams against one another in the spirit of competition. You're competing to do your best from an outside perspective. You're not to be pitting your salespeople against each other, your customer service people against. Don't do that.
Well, there's an immense amount of literature, associated with Norton's Balance Scorecard, and we've seen it across a variety of arenas, from environmentalism to health and safety to sales, where pitting groups against each other in a zero-sum game
Yeah.
will always lead to unwanted behaviors, because people get caught up in the idea of winning. But now is it really a win if others have to lose?
Yep. Exactly.
Right? It doesn't work.
It's a false motivation.
And then the last one, just quickly, is perfectionism. And this is where, like, the QA people are the most powerful people in the company, or the procedures people. You
Yep.
and I both worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and we have seen this go insane, as really this idea that the aspiring to perfectionism is somehow close to godliness, when in fact perfectionism for the sake of perfectionism is really obsessive compulsive behaviors gone insane.
Yeah, and it's funny, in the example that we gave in the last episode about MDS,
Yeah.
one of the flags for myself, being on the inside, of course, was that it just became difficult to get everyday activities done. Things started to get done by committee, the QA department, like you said, because I was in the lab. Things happening on the administrative side, all of a sudden we're taking 4, 5, and 6 extra steps because they wanted it to be right and perfect. And you can just physically feel the stall in momentum.
Well, and what you just described is fascinating, because I was also at MDS at the time, and the company had gotten in a lot of trouble with the FDA because they were doing clinical trials, and they'd made a lot of mistakes. And actually, the picture that I have is that two things are going on at the same time, and both were not good. The place is becoming more and more and more passive, defensive, bureaucratic, and conflict avoidant, at the same time that it was becoming more perfectionistic, because it confused being perfectionistic with being excellent.
Yep.
Didn't get the nuance.
Yep.
And so you ended up having exactly what you described. The bureaucrats and the administrators are freaking out about all the trouble they were getting in. So they exercised power, aggressive, but created bureaucracy, passive. And this whole mess up thing happened, and it just was part of why the business got driven into the ground.
Yes.
When the opportunity was to do the thing that mattered most, which was to promote being constructive.
Absolutely. And what's really unfortunate, I know that we're wrapping up soon. What's really unfortunate is, because of the original culture where everybody was constructive and they were in it to win it and we're a team, had the new information been disseminated across the organization, hey guys, things have changed, we've missed a few marks, we made a mistake, we need to improve, everybody would have rallied behind them and solved the situation together. But unfortunately, silos happen, bureaucracy happened, like you said, everyone's looking at everyone's looking at each other like, what the heck's going on here? And things slowly devolved.
The constructive side, that's a solution. And the OCI tool would have revealed this had it been used instead of the culture tool they were using.
Yeah.
They would have found a rise or they would have seen a fall in trust.
Mm-hmm.
They would have seen a rise in perfectionism and a rise in bureaucracy at the expense of excellence.
Yep.
We would have seen, a diminishment in being part of a team and becoming more individualistic. And we would have seen leaders resorting to their power instead of leading because they've earned it.
Absolutely.
And so they could have pressed on the levers that pushed into the constructive, and instead what they did was they doubled down on the levers and the aggressive and the passive, and they destroyed a company. I mean,
Yeah.
I have, because of the role I was in, it actually boiled down to a fairly small number of individuals and some absolutely shocking hires, people who should never have been in the company, and then something wasn't done to get rid of them. And it's just sad to see that with the right data, this all could have been detected. And with that data, plans could have gone into place where these
Yeah.
people would probably have self-selected out because they weren't a good fit.
It wasn't their place. And we talked about that in our toxic boss versus toxic culture episode. So as we close this off, Kirby, if you are a leader, an executive, a manager that is watching this, please understand that exactly what Kirby just described, it can take just a few people. And what we talked about is a global organization, tens of thousands of people. It's the decisions that were made by a few influential leaders that actually turned the course of an entire business.
Yeah.
So be mindful of that fact. This is why this tool is so important, is because it gives you the data to make good quality decisions in the right spot.
And what's wonderful about Human Synergistics, and I'll just say this in closing, we're thrilled to be in affiliation with them because they have just got so much experience and so much data to prove that business success parallels the quality of your culture.
Absolutely.
Their website is a treasure trove of stuff that any leader, you know, on the OD side, HR side, operations side, executive administration side, their stuff is awesome, and I hope that they will check it out.
I agree. So what I'll do, Kirby, is I'll have that information in a description box below so you guys can go check out Human Synergistics. Wherever you happen to be watching this, if it's Australia, if it's US, etc., you can find access to their website in the description box below. And until next time, please like the video, subscribe, and leave your comments below. We'd love to hear your feedback.
This is awesome. Thanks very much, Nicole. Look forward to our next time.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Take care.